Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States and beyond, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1417 of This Week in Amateur Radio. We'll begin with a lot of news from the FCC as the Commission is asked to adopt a plan that will take 9 UHF television channels for use in the new 6G wireless service. The FCC grants a satellite service frequencies for use. We'll tell you about that. The FCC is seeking recent college graduates for their honors engineering program. We will take a look at World Amateur Radio Day, as it was, in Puerto Rico. Stepper Antennas is making a comeback and returning to the amateur radio marketplace. An Indiana company has purchased high-gain and Cushcraft antennas from MFJ and will return to the amateur radio marketplace with made-in-the-USA antennas. ARDC, the Amateur Radio Digital Communications Group, has open positions they are looking to fill. The upcoming Dayton Hamvention has a forum for every amateur. The AMSAT satellite status page has changed. We will tell you what all the new colors mean. A below-average hurricane season is predicted for 2026. And the Radio Society of Great Britain, the RSGB, will have openings at its headquarters station for guest operators during this coming July. We will tell you all about that and a lot more, which is straight ahead on today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us that you don't need an excuse to get on the air and make noise. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to the summer of 1924, which brought the first explorers to the 4 new shorter wavelength bands that were opened up to amateurs' use in July. Amateurs anticipated interesting times ahead based on their earlier experimental work that produced the first transoceanic QSOs. This is part 1 of a series entitled DX Records and Shortwave Reflections. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio facility just outside of Albany, New York, where spring is really fighting to come back, I'm George, W2XBS.
Reporting this week from my basement studio in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Reporting from our studio in beautiful Bradenton, Florida, where I hope to have my first POTA kilo at US 1894, I'm Mike Nicolich, K9DX Mike.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from the all-new Ham Shack TV studios in Knoxville, Tennessee, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
Coming to you from the very busy Space Coast of Florida, I'm Ed Johnsen, W2PH.
And reporting from our Trey, New York News Bureau, where the spring flowers are blooming, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York. Well, we're expecting 2 inches of rain or more, continuing the never-ending series of mud incidences in our driveway. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we have been dodging lightning bolts lately, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Hello, everyone. Before we get into this week's newscast, I'd like to tell everyone that This Week in Amateur Radio now has its own Discord server. That's right, a place online where we can discuss everything technology and amateur radio. So join us. Just go to Discord on your computer or download the Discord app on your portable device and search for TWIAR or This Week in Amateur Radio. We look forward to seeing you on the new This Week in Amateur Radio Discord server. Today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio is 100% human.
A new proposal asked the FCC to clear out a large block of UHF broadcast spectrum, a move that could force more than 40% of U.S. TV stations to relocate. In an April 15th petition, a group called Landover Saturn 5 LLC urged the FCC to open a rulemaking that would repurpose channels 28 through 36 or 554 through 608 megahertz for flexible wireless use aimed at future 6G services. The plan dropped just 3 days before the start of the National Association of Broadcasters annual convention in Las Vegas. The company, which said it has the financial resources, technical expertise, and broadcaster relationships necessary for the success of this ambitious initiative, said the plan could generate roughly $15 billion for the U.S. Treasury while shifting participating broadcasters into shared next-gen TV arrangements.
The U.S. Federal Communications Commission announced that it has authorized AST Space Mobile's full 248 satellite constellation to use requested parts of the radio spectrum, including those that had drawn objections from the amateur radio community. The agency's move will permit AST to fulfill its goal of providing services to consumers in so-called dead zones, regions without terrestrial networks, especially for emergency services. The successful application on behalf of the Low Earth Orbit Satellite System was granted on April 21st with conditions. The grant for the use of 698 to 960 megahertz includes permission to make use of 430 to 440 megahertz for emergency control and tracking of the satellites, a move that amateur radio operators feared would cause interference with amateur operations in that band. The FCC has said that AST emergency telemetry use will be limited to the following frequencies for a duration of less than 24 hours. These frequencies include 430.5 megahertz, 434.1 megahertz, 435.9 megahertz, and 439.5 megahertz. The FCC has said in the past that interference with ham radio was unlikely.
The U.S. Federal Communications Commission has announced that it is once again accepting applications for its Honors Engineer program. Initiated in 2018, the one-year development program gives selected candidates an opportunity to work with FCC personnel on innovative issues in the communications and high-tech arenas, including 5G communications technology, the national deployment of broadband services, and communications technologies intended to improve access to those with disabilities. Other areas of potential focus include communications technologies critical to public safety, homeland security, healthcare, energy, education, and transportation. In addition, those selected to participate in the Honors Engineer program will be eligible for continued employment at the agency. Application to the FCC's Honors Engineer program is open to recent college graduates with an engineering degree, as well as current engineering students slated to graduate this year. For more information about the program and instructions on how to apply, go to www.usajobs.gov. Please note that the deadline for filing an application is April 30th, 2026.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Dayton Hamvention 2026 offers a wide range of forums to appeal to amateur radio operators of all interests, experience levels, and ages. The Hamvention Forums Committee has assembled a diverse lineup covering technical topics, operating skills, and emerging interest areas. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has the story.
On opening day, Friday, May 15th, there are 22 forums beginning at 9:15 a.m. with HamSci, the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation. Learn about the large-scale traveling ionospheric disturbance project, a version of the personal space weather station that you can build from scratch, Meteor Scour QSO party results, and an upcoming collaboration with the NASA mission. The moderator is Dr. Nathaniel Fussell, W2NAF. Another forum on Friday is Lightning Protection, Generators, Inverters, and RFI, moderated by Jim Batcher, WB8VSU, and Gary Bishop, NQ0V. At 11 a.m., ARRL is sponsoring Salty Walt's Portable Antenna Forum. Salty Walt Hudson K4OGO will cover simple, effective antennas that you can build and take to a park, bench, or summit and make contacts around the world. He'll also be signing copies of his newest book in the ARRL exhibit area. Among the other forums on Friday is TAPR, Topics in Digital Radio, the Antenna Forum, moderated by Tim Duffy, K3LR, and Arduino and Microcontrollers, Going the Distance with popular ARRL author Glenn Popeil, KW5GP. Young hams will want to start off Saturday morning with the Youth Forum, sponsored by the Radio Club of America, at 9:15 a.m. with student Weeblo presenters. An ARRL membership forum on Saturday at 11 a.m. will include updates on outreach to students and educators, momentum behind the Year of the Club, ARRL's partnership with America 250, and current legislative advocacy efforts shaping the future of amateur radio. That forum will be moderated by ARRL Great Lakes Division Director Scott Yonley, N8SY, with presentations from ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, and ARRL CEO David Minster, NA2AA. Hamvention 2026 runs May 15th through the 17th, and many more forums are spread throughout the weekend. See the entire lineup and schedule at hamvention.org/event-details/forums. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Young hams can join in some Saturday afternoon fun on the ARRL Youth Rally activities, scheduled from 1 to 4 p.m. Advanced registration is recommended for those students ages 11 to 21 who want to join this year's Youth Rally t-shirt and badge. An ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio meetup will follow the Youth Rally at 4 p.m. A handful of DX-themed forums on Saturday include the 3Y0K Bouvet D-Expedition, the Secho 2026 D-Expedition, the first all-solar-powered unattended D-Expedition, and a forum with Brian Bath, 88FD, and Paul Ewing, N6PSC, exploring the lessons learned from DXing in adverse conditions. Among the forums on Sunday is the POTA Hacks, Little Things Add Up to Big Success, moderated by Michael Martins, KB9VBR, who will share some of his favorite parks on the air operating tips and hacks. Other forums will cover the 3D printing for ham users, the HF digital modes, and mastering CW. The ARRL Events app will include the full Hamvention program by the end of the month. Use it to browse the schedule of forums, find affiliated events, and preview the extensive list of exhibitors. Get ready by downloading the app at www.tripbuildermedia.com, or you can use the web version.
The main activity for World Amateur Day 2026 in Puerto Rico was a special broadcast radio program with leaders of the ARRL Puerto Rico section, which aired April 16th on radio station Radio Progreso, WRSS 1410 AM. ARRL technical specialist Rafael Carrasquillo, KP4RAS, conducts a weekly program at the station about community preparedness and had an idea. First, to make a special program consisting of two parts, beginning with explaining to listeners what World Amateur Radio Day is all about, and at the same time making a special event on a repeater system. The program started at about 10:20 a.m. with KP4RAS in the studio, along with ARRL Puerto Rico section manager Carmen Green, KP4QVQ, technical coordinator Ariel Negron, WP4QEC, and QSL bureau manager Nestor Correa, WP4PRD. The program was complemented with an earlier recording featuring Section Emergency Coordinator Emmanuel Cruz, NP4D, and Public Information Coordinator Angel Santana Diaz, WP3GW, in which they explain the IARU, ARES, and the QSL Bureau system. During this segment, the special event was running from the radio station to the red Boricua repeater system, so those amateurs who had made contact could receive a special certificate of participation. There were also special on-air activations by the Federación de Radioaficionados de Puerto Rico, Federation of Radio Amateurs of Puerto Rico Station, KP4FRA, and Public Information Coordinator WP3GW operating as W4W. All this was thanks to KP4RAS, who wanted to do something special with the section for this special occasion, said Public Information Coordinator Santana Diaz.
Police in central New York State have arrested a man and charged him with interfering with emergency radio channels by transmitting false statements over equipment he was unauthorized to use. Local media reports said police stopped Chad Potter of Sherburne, New York, on March 31st while he was driving in a vehicle equipped with a number of radios tuned to frequencies where, according to police, he has been disrupting emergency services. A report on WBNG News 12 said that an investigation into the reported radio interference dates back to 2021. Police said that fire, EMS, and law enforcement operations were disrupted several times by his messages. The WBNG News report described one transmission as shots fired, which reportedly caused concern and confusion among first responders and the public. On the day Potter was arrested on the radio-related charges, city police had pulled him over in relation to a traffic stop. Investigators said his vehicle was equipped with aftermarket lighting that made it look like he was an emergency responder. Police issued a citation to him for the lighting.
The promise of creating space for 6G communications on the 2.7 gigahertz band has moved closer to reality in the United States following the band's successful technical review by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. The NTIA has been mandated to find room for full-power commercial licensed use on the band, which already has a pair of primary users, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Federal Aviation Administration. The NTIA issued a press release stating that it is assisting both agencies to make sure that radar systems, weather monitoring, and aviation safety technology will not be vulnerable to interference. Ariel Roth, the NTIA administrator, said this milestone brings us one step closer to ensuring the American people realize the full benefit of this spectrum as quickly as possible. A report last year by the Global System for Mobile Communications Association cautioned that communication capacity will be challenged by 2030 unless more mid-band is identified for 6G use.
Brett Walls, N9BA, has resigned as Central Division Director, citing professional and personal commitments. He has served as director since 2025, and before that as vice director, beginning in 2021. Serving in the capacity of division director has been a rewarding experience and the highlight of my amateur radio journey, said Walls in a message to ARRL members in the division. Whether supporting emergency communications, fostering technical growth, or strengthening our community connections, the ARRL plays an important part, and I am proud to have been part of it. Consistent with ARRL's governing documents, Joshua Long, W9HT of New Haven, Indiana, who has served as vice director since 2025, has assumed the office of Central Division Director effective immediately. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, will appoint a successor as vice director for the remaining term, which expires in 2027. The Central Division includes Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. ARRL is governed by an all-volunteer board of directors. Elections are held for 5 of the 15 ARRL divisions each year for terms of 3 years.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
If you visited the AMSAT satellite status page recently, you may have noticed the color scheme and satellite naming convention look a bit different. These changes have prompted some questions from the community, and we wanted to take a moment to explain the reasoning behind the updates. We received a request to change transponder repeater operational from blue to green, since green often means good. That made sense, so we made the change along with a few other minor color adjustments. When we rolled it out, however, we quickly heard from users who couldn't distinguish transponder repeater operational from no signal heard. After some research, we learned that red-green color blindness affects roughly 10% of the population, and that's just one of 3 prominent types of color vision deficiency, each affecting a different part of the spectrum. After further research, we adopted the IBM colorblind palette, which allows 99.988% of people to reliably distinguish between 5 colors. While some users have suggested alternative color schemes, many of these proposals would reintroduce the same accessibility conflicts we set out to solve. As satellites grow more capable, many now carry multiple operating modes. Rather than assigning a separate color to each mode, which quickly becomes impractical when a single satellite may support 5 or 6, we've given each mode its own line on the status page. To accommodate this, we updated the naming convention from just the satellite name to the satellite name plus mode. For example, SSTV operations on the International Space Station now appear as ISS_SSTV . This approach scales cleanly as the new multimode satellites come online. We also renamed transponder repeater operational to satellite active, which simply means the mode you selected to report on is active. We made this change because transponder and repeater are two-way modes, and an increasing number of satellites are now being launched with interesting one-way modes other than just telemetry and beacons. We're always open to suggestions, but please remember, we are all volunteers at AMSAT.
A leading U.S. antenna manufacturer is coming back to the ham radio marketplace following its departure last summer. Stepper, which announced last summer that it was halting production of its popular antennas for the amateur radio market, is returning to the ham radio business. A recent statement on the website of the Washington State Company said that although Stepper had decided last year to focus on commercial sales, recent favorable developments in that sector will permit the company to resume supplying hams with antenna kits, parts, and accessories as before. The ham radio market is to be served only through online sales. Stepper said that the commercial side of its business may lead to the introduction of new products for amateur radio. The company acknowledged that its earlier decision was made in search of more stable long-term income sources, but said that Stepper never gave up the hope that it would go back to serving amateur radio operators in some way.
Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC, is looking to fill 2 part-time contract positions to support its ongoing work in software development. ARDC has remote positions open for a software developer and a technical writer who are experienced professionals familiar with free and open source projects. Both jobs are open to active amateur radio operators. The software developer is expected to be involved in bug fixes, code review, and deployment, and be capable of writing documentation that is developer-focused. JavaScript, CSS, HTML, MySQL, PHP, and Linux fluency is required. Candidates must have had prior experience with either ARDC or 44net. The technical writer must be capable of writing for a public audience on topics related to digital communications and amateur radio. A record of previously published articles is considered a plus. Both positions report to ARDC's technical director. For more details about requirements for these jobs, which carry a 2-month renewable contract, visit ARDC on the web at www.ardc.net.
In his pickup truck on the way back to Indiana from Starkville, Mississippi, ITU Corporation President and Founder David Carpenter, KC9ATG, told the ARRL his company will indeed begin building high-gain and Cushcraft antennas. With more on this story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
Carpenter became interested last year in purchasing the antenna lines from Martin Jew, K5FLU, retired owner of MFJ Enterprises. "We were not able to make the deal last year," said Carpenter, "but I called him a few weeks ago, and with a handshake, the deal was done." ITU, which currently sells ham and CB gear as well as training products for multiple industries, has also purchased the former Linton National Guard Armory, which will become the new manufacturing hub for these legendary U.S. antenna brands. Carpenter said his company will soon begin moving the manufacturing equipment from Mississippi to Linton, Indiana, and start taking orders by the fourth quarter of this year. The new operation is expected to employ a staff of 20 initially and then up to 50 people. "These antennas will be American-made," said Carpenter. Martin F. Jew, founder of MFJ Enterprises, was quoted as saying he expressed confidence that High Gain and Crushcraft, renowned for their robust design, high gain, and worldwide use by radio amateurs, will continue living up to their legacy under ITU's American-made engineering and customer-focused approach. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
With existing brands like TechShack and LearnLab already in its portfolio, ITU is positioning the Linton, Indiana site as a center for high-performance antennas, rotators, and accessories used by hams and professional stations.
An initial prediction for the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season suggests slightly fewer storms than average due to the anticipated development of El Niño conditions in the coming months. John Ross, KD8I-DJ, files this special report from League headquarters.
The forecast from Colorado State University predicts 13 named storms, just below the average of 14.4, of which 6 are expected to gain hurricane strength and 2 are likely to become major hurricanes, Category 3 or higher. According to the researchers, El Niño is a climate pattern in which warmer than normal water temperatures in the eastern and central Pacific increase westerly winds into the Caribbean and eastern Atlantic. That results in greater wind shear that inhibits hurricane formation and strengthening. The forecast also predicts a 20% chance of a major hurricane making landfall along the U.S. Gulf Coast this year, along with a 15% chance of a major hurricane hitting the Atlantic coast. AccuWeather has its own early forecast, similar but less specific, predicting 11 to 16 named storms, including 4 to 7 hurricanes and 2 to 4 major hurricanes. The National Hurricane Center, NHC, is expected to release its initial predictions for the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season mid-season in mid-May. Assessing tropical storm-related hazards inland will be easier this year with enhancements to the NHC's frequently used cone maps, which will now show watches and warnings inland as well as along the coast. Many tropical storms and hurricanes cause significant damage after coming ashore. Amateur Radio Emergency Service, Aries groups in all hurricane-prone areas are advised to remain vigilant regardless of the forecast. ARRL Emergency Communications and Field Services Director Josh Johnsen, KE5MHV, noted that the watchword at the recent National Hurricane Conference, in which he was a presenter, was that it only takes one bad storm to be a bad year. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
ARRL has memoranda of understanding to work cooperatively with a variety of governmental and non-governmental agencies that are active in response to hurricanes and other disasters.
New requirements for radio amateurs are introduced in Moldova. The National Regulatory Agency for Electronic Communications and Information Technology in Moldova drafted a new regulation of the radio amateur service of the Republic of Moldova. According to the document, the use of radio stations necessarily requires a license issued on the basis of an amateur radio operator's certificate. They are valid for 5 years and are categorized by qualification classes. Foreign radio amateurs can temporarily operate on Moldovan territory without a local license if their country is a member of the European Conference of Postal and Telecommunications Administrations, or CEPT, but prior notification to the regulator is required. Radio amateurs can operate not only on terrestrial frequencies, but also via radio stations on artificial satellites. There are also strict requirements for call signs. It is forbidden to transmit commercial, coded, or unauthorized messages, as well as to interfere with other communication services. Radio amateurs in Moldova are recommended to use the International Phonetic Alphabet for radio telephone communications.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air. This week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. We're starting off tonight with 3 pieces of DX news. First, from the Northern California DX Foundation, we have this. The NCDXF is pleased to announce a grant to the Mediterraneo DX Club for the 9 Tango Zero Mike Delta DXpedition to the Democratic Republic of the Congo later this year. This team has successfully completed many DXpeditions and plans are ready for success once again. They plan to favor CW and voice modes and will be on satellite and EME for the first time. Visit their website for more information, which is www.mdxc.org. That's exciting. Also from the NCDXF, we have this. The NCDXF held its annual board meeting on April 13th. New officers are K9CT Craig Thompson, President, AA7A Ned Stearns, Vice President, W0GJ Glenn Johnsen, Secretary, and N1DG Don Greenbaum, Treasury. Current board members are K6TD Kevin Rowlett, Nancy Delta 2 Tango Tom Burson, Kilo Yankee 7 Mike Lee Finkel, K6 Mickey Mouse John Miller, KE1 Bravo Rich Seifert, and K4 SV Dave Anderson. The board thanks K6 Tango Delta Kevin Rowlett for his 5 years of service as president. And I'll tell you, I know the majority of those guys, and they are ethical, and they are focused, and that's really a great group to be running the largest DX foundation we have. So congratulations. Our second news flash is regarding high-gain and Cushcraft antennas. High-gain and Cushcraft antennas have been sold. K5 Fox Lima United, Martin Jew, president and founder of MFJ Enterprises, has announced the sale of the high-gain and Cushcraft product lines, including antennas, rotors, communication equipment, to ITU Corporation, an engineering and manufacturing company based in Indiana with 25 years of experience. According to news reports, ITU Corporation will repurpose the 15-acre Linton National Guard Armory site for this purpose, creating 20 to 50 jobs for the local economy. Martin Jew said, quote, I am thrilled to pass the torch of these legendary antenna brands to Dave and Canby Carpenter and their team at ITU Corporation. After nurturing these brands for decades, it was vital to me that High-Gain and Cushcraft, premier brands that have served radio operators and stations worldwide for generations, landed in the hands of someone who understands their legacy, end quote. Finally, we can announce that 3 Delta 2 Juliet Kilo is now QRT from Fiji, with 3,300 QSOs logged from 86 countries. He says band conditions were challenging. Rates increased quickly on the first 2 days, then it was a struggle the last 2 days. The last 4 hours, on 20, he was able to log only 8 calls. He then got most of the gear packed, including the Buddy Hex antenna, for his flight out. During the last few hours, he was actually able to keep working JAs on 6 meters. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, do what several of my listeners and watchers have done and drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll make sure you get taken care of. Victor Kilo 9 Charlie, which is Cocos Keeling Islands, Mark VK9 BSA, and Dina VK9 Delta Echo Echo have received their radio equipment at Cocos Keeling and are now active on the air until May 17th, with operations mainly on weekends and after work as they balance family life on the island. This Sunday will be a dedicated radio day, and Dina is interested in connecting with other women on the air. Frequency and timing details will be shared via email with single sideband as the chosen mode and plans for regular after-work activity on the 20-meter bands. If I hear of any of that, I'll certainly pass that along to you. Charlie Tango 3, which is Madeira Island. Charlie Tango 9 stroke Delta Lima 1 Boston United is QRV and continues until May 2nd. Mark says for his holiday, he took his IC 7300 10-meter tall fiberglass mast and an off-center fed dipole, the, quote, Aerial 51, end quote. His first day was devoted to setting it all up and testing it, but I know you'll hear him soon. We have this from Morocco, which is Charlie November. Charlie November 2, November Quebec Victor, is the call for Fox 8 November Quebec Victor, who is QRV until July 11th. The QTH will be the town of Sidi Rahal Shati on the Atlantic, 70 kilometers south of Casablanca. His plans are for 40, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters, with target frequencies being 7155, 14345, 18140, 21165, and 28575. Pascal's gear runs 100 watts to a diamond vertical on the rooftop, about 15 meters above ground level. From Kenya, which is 5 Zulu, we have this. 5 Zulu 4 stroke Mike Mike 0 Zulu Bravo Hotel is QRV holiday style until June 15th with 100 watts and wire antennas. You can QSL via the MM0ZBH home QTH, but his first choice is Logbook of the World. Direct is SASE, no USD or IRC needed. Paul says, I'm happy to pay the return postage. I always throw the return postage in there to help him out. From Bonaire in the Caribbean, we have this, and they are Papa Juliet 4. Papa Juliet 4 Tango Bravo is QRV again by Tango Juliet, PE1OIR, until May 4th, holiday style, 40 through 6 meters sideband and FT8, FT4. TJ has an IC7300, a PAC-12 vertical that he's modified to cover 40 through 6 meters, and an end-fed wire antenna. He says he only uses LOTW for e-confirmations, no EQSL or traditional cards by mail. His LOTW and QRZ uploads are once a week. From the Marquesa Islands, which is Tango Fox Ocean Stroke Mike or Tango X-Ray, we have this. Tango X-Ray 9 Whiskey, T Marquesas, arrived on Hiva Oa and made their way to their site to begin the setup. Their team leader, K5 Whiskey Echo, Jeff, had a medical emergency the night before departure early Saturday. He spent the night in the hospital, and the decision is being made when and whether he can join the team. Setup is underway, and they are QRV. Unfortunately, the decision was made, and Jeff was sent home, back to the house, where he is the pilot for that organization. He's also their chief IT guy, and I'm sure it's killing him to do all this planning, and then he can't be there. But Jeff, I hope you mend quickly. From Kosovo, we have this. Kosovo is Zulu 6. Zulu 66 Sierra Papa with Polish teammates will be QRV from near Pristina, April 23rd to the 28th. CW sideband and FT8, 160 through 10 meters. They will be in the Polish DX RIDI contest this weekend and will also do some 6-meter and QO 100. QSL using Clublog, OQRS, and LOTW. So we have another African station on the air, Lesotho, which is 7 Papa. 7 Papa 8 Whiskey Radio will be QRV until May 1 by Italy Zulu 0 Echo Victor India, Italy Zulu 0 Echo Whiskey Juliet, and Italy Zulu 6 Delta Sierra Quebec. For antennas, they will have a spider beam covering 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters, a 3-element skipper for 10, loops for 20 through 10, another loop from 40 through 15, and a 40-meter vertical. For radios, it's 3 IC7300s and an IC706 Mark IIG, plus amplifiers. And this can all be QSL'd via Italy Zulu 0 Italy Zulu 0 Echo Whiskey Juliet via the Bureau or direct, LOTW, QRZ.com, but no EQSLs. QSLs will be uploaded to LOTW, Clublog, and QRZ.com as well. From Mongolia, which is Juliet Tango, we have this. Vladimir, R9 Lima Radio, and Dennis, Romeo 8 Lima Charlie Mike, will be QRV as Juliet Tango 0 Lima Radio from Rare Grids, NN49, NN48, and NN58, and perhaps NN59. Activity will be between April 25th and April 30th on various bands using CW, sideband, and digital. Satellite QO100 also will be used, and you can QSL the Mongolian operation via Radio 9 Lima Radio. And finally, from Timor-Leste, which is 4 Whiskey, we have this. DX World reports 4 Whiskey Stroke Echo Alpha 2 Tango Alpha Christian has the licenses in hand now. He, who is 4 Whiskey Stroke Echo Alpha 3 November Tango and 4 Whiskey Stroke Echo Zulu 7 Alpha Tango November, are now on the air from Timor Island. Their operation continues to April 28th, 80 through 6 meters CW, sideband, and FT8. 60 meters is not allowed in Timor-Leste, so Joe, no 60 meters from them. QSL all of this via Italy Zulu 7 Alpha Tango November or Logbook of the World. This week, the DX Mentor YouTube channel will feature Kilo 6 Victor Hotel Fox and the group that activated Wallis and Fortuna Islands. Give it a watch and let me know what you think. We really enjoyed making it. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 53rd segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organization's Events Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. With our gratitude to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website for these segments, we bring you this, the next chapter of Ham Radio History. DX Records and Shortwave Reflections, or the Heaviside Road to the Antipode. Summer 1924 brought us the first explorers to the 4 new shorter wavelength bands that were opened up to amateur radio use in July. Amateurs anticipated interesting times ahead based on their earlier experimental work that produced the first transatlantic QSOs. Those had been achieved at 100 meters under special licenses for operating below 150 meters, a region the government designated as reserved the previous year without explanation. This was presented in the previous segment, First Band, Top Band. No one knew how the shorter waves would behave, but hams began to form a vague intuition based on understanding the high-altitude atmospheric layers. A long series of experiments during 1924 by John Reinhardt's at his experimental station 1XAM resulted in 5,000 reception reports from 5 European and 18 North American receiving stations and led to some new insights. Reinhardt wrote that when very short waves were used, say 20 meters or lower, signals became weaker at night rather than stronger, opposite the case for the familiar wavelengths above 100 meters. Also, signals were often stronger at long distances than short ones. Explaining these behaviors, he noted the existence of the heaviside layer, a conductive shell of upper atmosphere that reflects radio signals. It was believed that at lower altitudes, air is a conductor in the daytime, but becomes an insulator at night, due to the sun ionizing the air in the daylight hours. Therefore, the reflecting layer was at a lower altitude in the daytime than at night. His tests tended to confirm much of this, but it also suggested some modifications to the theory. Reinhardt noticed there were 2 sides to the propagation limiting phenomena. At noon there was a minimum wavelength in the vicinity of 50 meters, below which no signals propagated regardless of the power level, falling off in strength within 1 meter change in wavelength. At the opposite extreme, there was a maximum wavelength above which signals would also fall off. Thus, there seemed to be a band or window of wavelengths that one could get through at midday, and the whole window would move upward in wavelength as the day wore on. He also observed that in daylight there was a region near a transmitter where his signals could be easily heard, followed by a broad range of distances in which there was no signal, followed by a much greater distance where signals could again be heard. The second, longer received distance was, of course, the more interesting one. The distance tended to be shorter toward the east than toward the west before noon, about the same in both directions at noon, and reverse after noon, following the sun. Also, the wavelength of the window would move lower in the morning than increase in the afternoon. His analysis of reception reports also suggested that different frequencies were reflected from layers of different heights at a given time of day. Reinhardt speculated that if higher frequencies penetrated further into the reflection layer than lower frequencies, that would account for the frequency dependence on distance. In all of this analysis, he was considering only a 45-degree radiation angle. Another useful way to view these propagation zones was as concentric rings surrounding a transmitting station. The short, dead, and long zones formed circles around the station at noon, became elongated towards the west in the morning and towards the east in the afternoon. Following this logic, the circles were also elongated away from the equator at any particular time of day. Reinhardt's concluded that if this theory held, it should be possible to pick an optimal wavelength on which to best communicate with any given distance on the Earth, depending on the time of day, an essentially correct view, lacking complications not yet understood. But he failed to reason that if ever shortwave wavelengths penetrated further into the reflecting layer, there might be a wavelength above which they never reflect but shoot straight through. He asserted with confidence that 1925 would see direct international contact on waves below 1 meter. He also conceded that amateurs were just beginning to probe propagation phenomena, and only through continued experiments at short wavelengths could they gain a more thorough understanding. In editor's notes following Reinhardt's article, technical editor R.S. Cruz added ideas about radiation angle and its effects on propagation distance when radio waves travel through a diffuse refracting layer as opposed to a reflecting one, thus rounding out the theory. H.A. Joyce of the University of Detroit later proposed to build further upon previous theory by Reinhardt's and Cruz. He may have been the first to link shortwave reflection to similar refraction and reflection of light from interfaces, such as can be seen in a glass of water, leading to a discussion of the radiation angle of vertical antennas of various lengths. Joyce used simple geometry to approximate the height of the atmosphere reflecting layer by using the radiation angle and the distance of the received station. As fall turned to winter in late 1924 and EX work accelerated, new records were set at a rapid pace. Word spread and amateurs worldwide were entering the shortwave realm in increasing numbers, not just in the U.S. The laurels in this little old game of amateur radio no longer belong to America, reported Warner. On 19 October, a sheep farmer named Frank D. Bell in Palmertown's South, New Zealand, made contact as Z4AA with C.W. Goiter, G2SZ, in Mill Hill School, London, for a 90-minute QSO on 92 meters. 6 days later, Ralph Slade of Dunedin, New Zealand, was in contact with British 2NM Gerald Marcus, IARU VP, an 11,900-mile new distance record. Several U.S. New Zealand QSOs were also made and would normally have been a big deal had they not been overshadowed by the UK New Zealand contacts. "It is staggering," exclaimed Warner. "Unless somebody can arrange to get into communication with a ship diametrically opposed his station on the other side of the Earth, carefully arranging to achieve the world's maximum of 12,500 miles, it is very doubtful if this record will ever be exceeded," he wrote, failing to anticipate long-path propagation. However, shortly afterward, R.Y. Orbell Z3AA took a station to sea, sailing from New Zealand to England on an easterly route that took him past Cape Horn into the Atlantic while in constant contact with home. Why, if the New Zealanders can follow Z3AA across the Atlantic to England, they will have succeeded in working around the world in both directions, for the G2SZ Z24AA communication apparently occurred over a line east from Greenwich, wrote Warner, although how he knew this he did not say. Presumably it was because that was the nighttime path, as the prevailing theory would predict. He added that anybody willing to outfit a floating shortwave ham station under the Stars and Stripes and send it to the antipodes of good old U.S. stations, please communicate with ARRL headquarters. Antipodes are diametrically opposite points on the globe. More information can be found in the Trans-Pacific segment. There's a mathematical possibility of exceeding this British New Zealand DX record by 600 miles and a chance in a million of doing it. As 1924 concluded, reports arrived that several new countries had been added to the list of those known to be active on the new amateur bands. Stations C1AR in Halifax contacted B4YZ in Belgium for the first contact between North America and that country. C1AR also made the first North American contact with Sweden, working SMZS in Stockholm. Bermuda had an amateur licensing process in the works, but was not yet on the air. WJS in Brazil made a first U.S. contact with the Stanford University station 60I in December. There was a first report from British South Africa of receiving U.S. signals there. In India, an amateur received signals from U.S. station 1AAC in QSO with Z4AA in New Zealand. 1KC in Northampton, Massachusetts worked GHAI in Mosul, Mesopotamia for the first contact with Asia since the still unconfirmed 7HG contact with JUPU a year earlier. He also worked FAIN in Casablanca on Christmas Eve for the first QSO with Morocco. American 2BY worked EAR2 for the first contact with Spain. Denmark joined in, where D7EC contacted U1MY in East Hartford in November, passing several messages, and on it went. Included in this material are quotes from the following. J.I. Reinhardt's The Reflection of Short Waves, QST, April 1925, page 9. Obituary, Oliver Heaviside, QST, April 1925, page 18. H.A. Joyce, How Are Shortwaves Reflected, QST, 1925, page 29. K.B. Warner, Antipodes Linked by Amateur Radio, QST, December 1924, page 14. This month's International DX, QST, February 1925, page 13. K.B. Warner, Super DX, QST, January 1925, page 13. With our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I came across a post on mastodon.radio by Keith, Whiskey 6 Kilo Mike Echo, announcing the resumption of the Microfield Day, spelled using the 12th letter of the Greek alphabet, mu. This was news to me since I didn't know they'd stopped, let alone existed at all. Being the curious type, I stopped to investigate and discovered an initiative that could, and in my not-so-humble opinion, should be replicated all over the planet. Essentially an informal monthly gathering of amateurs with their portable setup, ranging from handheld radios through lightweight backpack gear suitable for SOTA or POTA, or summits or parks on the air, to car portable stations where your vehicle acts as the carry mule and perhaps the base of your antenna. In other words, it's for anyone who brings along their radio to play, or if you're not yet ready to do that, come and participate as you feel inclined. So what of the resumption, you ask? It turns out that the activity became so popular locally that some parks required paid bookings and insurance, which is somewhat challenging if you're not actually an organisation. The closest I've ever come to a Microfield Day is when we celebrated a milestone anniversary for the weekly F-Troop Net that has now been running for over 15 years. The BoardNet Group website has plenty of information about what they get up to during a Microfield Day. Random metal objects on the air, shared club activities, picnic lunches, and activations at local lakes, landmarks, and other places of interest. I'd also like to make a point here about documenting your activities so the rest of the community can learn from your experience. And the Microfield Day isn't the only or even the first activity that the group organised. Special mention to Zach, November 6 Papa Kilo, who started hosting the BoardNet 4 times a day during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown in March 2020. You'll find the full story when you check out their site at theboardnet.net for that and oodles more inspiration. While I'm perfectly happy sitting at home behind a computer reading research on the resource comparison between half a dozen algorithms for calculating a fast Fourier transform, that's not the only thing that amateur radio represents. When I started running F-Troop, there was no place for new and returning amateurs to gather and ask questions and share their experiences. Today, the log shows at least one new call sign for each week we've been on air, representing nearly 1,000 amateurs who activated their transmitter and shared their experience. There's no organisation behind F-Troop. It's a couple of amateurs who regularly turn up and participate to act as a welcoming voice into the diverse community that represents amateur radio. In other words, it started because I felt like it, and it continues because people keep coming back. The Micro Field Day is exactly the same, in that it was started to scratch an itch. I'm making this explicit because some amateurs appear to be under the impression that they'll need a local club or organisation to organise activities for them. I'm here to tell you that you can start such an activity with your friends. Ultimately, where do you think clubs come from? So, what are you waiting for? Get on air and make some noise. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
A special board meeting of the Northern California DX Foundation took place on April 20th. During the meeting, the board expanded the number of directors to add 2 new members as part of an effort to strengthen youth involvement in DXing. Appointed to the board were Violetta Latham, KN2P, and Max Friedman, N4ML. Friedman is a member of the ARRL staff and an active DXpeditioner, while Latham also brings hands-on DXpedition experience and a strong connection to the next generation of operators. The creation of these positions and the selection of younger operators with proven DXpedition credentials reflects a broader initiative by the Northern California DX Foundation to encourage greater participation by young hams. The foundation says it looks forward to the insights in helping shape programs and support systems that will engage and sustain future DXers. The NCDXF board also accepted the resignation of board director George Waller, AA7JV, who was recognized for his work spearheading the development of radio in a box, or RIB technology that continues to gain momentum in the DX community. Greg Marco, W6IZT, was elected to replace Wallner on the board. Marco is passionate about the participation of young hams in DXpeditions. He's led several DXpedition efforts recently, including Young Many New Hams, and he's developed a next-generation rib system that has been instrumental in including many young hams in DXpeditions via remote access. The Northern California DX Foundation provides scholarships to Contest University, held each year in Dayton before Hamvention, for those 25 years of age and under. The organization also partners with International Amateur Radio Union to operate the NCDXF beacon system worldwide.
An important source for rebuilt power tubes is going away. Microwave Power Products plans to close operations at the former Econco facility in California, ending its program for rebuilding the tubes used in vacuum tube-type transmitters. MPP said operations at the Woodland manufacturing site will cease on September 1, 2026, as it consolidates operations to Palo Alto. As part of the transition, the company will discontinue repair services for Econco power grid tubes, though it will continue to manufacture new tubes. The move also ends Econco's bank program, which allowed customers to store non-working power grid tubes at the Woodland facility to be rebuilt and made available for future purchase. The deadline to purchase repaired Econco power grid tubes is May 12th at close of business. According to the release, failure to confirm a purchase or request the return of non-working tubes by that date will be treated as consent for MPP to dispose of property remaining in the bank program. According to a timeline on MPP's website, Econco was founded in 1968 and held the first contracts awarded by the U.S. government to remanufacture microwave devices, twice receiving the Navy's Award for Excellence. The development is significant for stations using transmitters that require tubes such as the IMAC 4CX 20000E. Several customers have expressed concern regarding the dwindling number of companies offering rebuilt power tubes, which provide a cost-effective alternative to purchasing new tubes or a solid-state transmitter. Massachusetts-based Kenetron advertises vacuum tube rebuilds, and some readers have inquired about options on Alibaba, including those from Chinese manufacturer Jingguang, though some expressed concerns about sourcing from China, including reliability and import tariffs. Dave Morgan is the Director of Engineering at Sinclair Telecable in the Hampton Roads region of Southeast Virginia. Among his properties are 2 AM sites using tube-type transmitters and a Gates-Harris FM model. Vacuum power tube technology is proven and still somewhat reliable, he said, though less efficient than solid state. He has observed over the years that Gates-Harris, Collins Continental, and Broadcast Electronics built their tube transmitters to last. Morgan acknowledged that some engineers have reported quality control or lifespan issues from rebuilders in recent years. I understand that the power tube rebuilders and manufacturers might be having a harder time nowadays sourcing elements like tungsten and thorium, he said. But Morgan Sinclair Properties, no relation to the larger Sinclair Broadcast Group, have had no significant problems with rebuilt tubes over the decades. His stations follow the rebuilders' break-in procedures to the letter, paying close attention to filament voltages, aiming for proper tuning, monitoring stack temperatures, and keeping the ambient air inside the transmitter buildings clean, cool, and dry. Like everything else after 2020, the costs for tube rebuilding shot up, Morgan said. As a result, the cost for brand new tubes followed suit.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. On April 23rd, ARICA-2 was to be launched aboard Rocket Lab's Electron. The satellite is a 2U CubeSat. About 300 seconds after deployment, the UHF antenna will be deployed. CW transmissions should immediately follow on 436.830 MHz. The satellite call sign is JS1YSD. The satellite will send pictures after commissioning. The IARU has just released a new document which serves as an essential resource for anyone involved in satellite frequency coordination, licensing, or satellite project planning. It is called Handbook on Amateur and Amateur Satellite Services. It is free of charge and can be downloaded from itu.int/pub/r-hdb-52-2026. You can use all uppercase or all lowercase letters. One of the more interesting sections in the document is Chapter 2.1, Applications of Bands Allocated to the Amateur Satellite Service. Many times, those building satellites believe they can select almost any band and frequency. However, to fall under Part 95 rules, there are specific bands and frequencies that can be used. Did you know that amateur satellites have primary allocation from 248 GHz to 250 GHz? Someday we may have a satellite that will operate at those frequencies. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time now for the weekly terrestrial propagation forecast and a look at the solar weather forecast. Solar activity remained at low levels this past week with numerous C1 flares from region 4420, which exhibited growth during the period. Region 4419 showed minor decay, particularly in trailing spots, while producing a lone C1.0 flare. Region 4422 was numbered during the period but remained inactive. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in coronagraph imagery. Solar activity is expected to continue at low levels with a slight 10% chance for isolated M-class activity all the way through April 24th, primarily due to the flare potential from region 4420 and LIM activity. Solar wind parameters reflected waning coronal hole high-speed stream influences. The wind speed maintained an average of 525 kilometers per second, and the phi angle was predominantly in a negative orientation towards the sun. Mildly enhanced solar wind conditions are anticipated through April 23rd as the negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream continues to move from its geoeffective position, transitioning to elevated conditions on April 24th due to the anticipated arrival of a positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Lewetzel-Swab K9LA.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, April 25th through the 26th, the TAPR DX contest, that's phoned. April 25th through the 26th as well, the SPDX RTTY contest, that is digital. The 25th to the 26th, the UKEIDX contest, that's CW. And April 25th to the 26th, the Helveta contest, CW, phone, and digital. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions. On May 3rd, it's the Warminster Amateur Radio Club Annual Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Eastern Pennsylvania Section Convention. That's in Bristol, Pennsylvania. May 9th, the ARRL Nebraska State Convention in Lincoln, Nebraska. And on June 5th through the 7th, it's CPAC, hosting the ARRL Northwestern Division Convention in Seaside, Oregon. The Nashua Area Radio Society, N1FD, will hold its next online ham boot camp Saturday, May 9th from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Ham boot camp is an online interactive program to help new, inactive, and prospective hams learn the skills they need to get on the air, including how to build a station, how to participate, and activities that you can do with your ham radio license. The morning sessions are all about VHF, and the afternoon sessions focus on HF. There is no fee to attend the ham boot camp. For more information, including how to register, it's available now at n1fd.org/bootcamp. The Nashua Area Radio Society is an ARRL-affiliated and special service club.
Fuji Oscar 29, or FO29-JAS2, the long-lived Japanese amateur radio satellite launched in 1996, continues to operate its VHF-UHF inverting analog linear transponder under the control of the Japan Amateur Radio League. Because the onboard batteries have failed years ago, the satellite depends entirely on solar power and can only function when its solar panels are illuminated. FO29 entered a full sunlight orbit around March 9, 2026. During full sunlight periods, the satellite experiences no or negligible eclipses, allowing the analog transponder to operate continuously on illuminated passes without scheduled command activations. The first full sunlight window began in early March 2026 and lasted approximately 40 days. According to the JARL schedule, this continuous operation ends around April 21, 2026, after which the satellite will enter an eclipse period for about 1 month. A second, longer full sunlight period is expected from approximately May 20th to mid-November 2026, during which continuous operations should resume. During eclipse periods or the transition out of full sunlight, the JARL control team sends specific commands to activate the transponder at designated UTC times. If the transponder does not turn on within about 2 minutes of the command start, the team terminates the attempt. During confirmed full sunlight periods, no regular command schedule is needed. The transponder stays active whenever the satellite is in sunlight. Operators should always check real-time status via AMSAT Live Satellite Status, Oscar status pages, or recent community reports, as voltage instability in the aging satellite can occasionally cause unexpected behavior. Amateurs are reminded to use proper Doppler correction, follow linear transponder etiquette, listen before transmitting, keep signals clean, and limit uplink power to avoid overloading the transponder, which is typically no more than a few watts with a modest antenna. The JRRL page provides the detailed historical and upcoming command schedules for eclipse periods across 2025-2026. For the absolute latest status and any updates from the Japanese control team, monitor the official JARL FO29 page, AMSAT.org, and AMSAT bulletins. FO29's continued operation nearly 30 years after launch remains a testament to robust engineering and the dedication of the JARL team.
Ray Roberge, WA1CYB, will be the speaker at the 17th Annual AMSAT and TAPR Banquet. Roberge, a member of AMSAT's engineering team, will speak about progress on AMSAT's SDR Gen 2 project, including what it does and where it can be used. AMSAT's SDR Gen 2 is a versatile, programmable GNU radio transceiver transponder designed for a 1U CubeSat footprint. The transceiver has 144 MHz, 6 GHz continuous coverage, with 10 GHz coverage expected as well. The transceiver will support direct VHF, UHF, L, S, C, and X-band operations in all modes, including CW, SSB, FT8, narrowband FM, SSTV, FSTV, etc., and a downlink data rate of up to 1 megabits per second. The transceiver is being built to fly on Gulf and Fox Plus missions and will be both open source, hardware, and software. The 17th annual AMSAT and TAPR Banquet will be held at the Kohler Presidential Banquet Center on Friday, May 15th at 1830 EDT. This dinner is always a highlight of the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio and AMSAT Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation activities during the Dayton Hamvention. The Kohler Presidential Banquet Center is located at 4548 Presidential Way in Kettering, Ohio, about 20 minutes away from the Greene County Fairgrounds. Tickets may be purchased from the AMSAT store. The banquet ticket purchase deadline is Monday, May 11th at 1700 EDT or 2100 UTC. Banquet tickets must be purchased in advance and will not be sold at the AMSAT booth. There will be no tickets to pick up at the AMSAT booth. Tickets purchased online will be maintained on a list with check-in at the door of the banquet center. Seating is limited to the number of meals reserved with the Kohler caterers based on the number of tickets sold by the deadline.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
Amateur radio operators worldwide are invited to be part of a unique special event underway now and lasting until December of 2026. The occasion is the 900th anniversary of the first written mention of Jaromír, a small town in the Czech Republic. Jaromír has about 12,000 inhabitants at the confluence of three rivers, and that area around the rivers has been populated as early as 40,000 BC. The first written mention of Jaromír is from 1126, when a fortress founded by Duke Jaromír is documented in the area's today's Church of St. Nicholas. For the special event, 3 call signs will be used: OL900CO, OL900JAR, and OL9LTV. For electronic diplomas or QSL cards, the bronze, silver, and gold platinum will be issued in electronic form for contacts with these stations and other activities. Read more information about ARRL.org.
There are 100 reasons why hams in New Zealand are planning to attend this year's conference of the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters. 100 reasons, one for each year the association has served radio operators. An annual conference comes along every year, but a centennial conference only comes along every 100 years, once in a lifetime. The New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters will be honoring its past and looking toward its future on May 30th and 31st in Auckland, as guests gather for the Milestone Centennial Conference. The ham radio spirit of experimentation will acknowledge the earliest adventures in wireless and will explore the way today's hams test our advanced digital technologies. Presentations will tell NZART's story from its earliest origins. NZART members who pay for a full registration to the conference will receive a free copy of an illustrated book that tells the association's history. Other copies will also be available to purchase. Registration has opened, and visitors who book their accommodations before April 26 will be eligible for discounted rates. Details are available on the web at nzart100conference.nzart.org.nz.
Windmills, water mills, tidal mills, and even horse mills. Historic sites like these, scattered throughout the UK, are celebrated annually in early May by the Society for the Prevention of Ancient Buildings. In 1996, a former Denby Dale Radio Society joined that effort by creating Mills on the Air, a special event which, this year, takes place on Saturday, May 9 and Sunday, May 10. The Dunsfield House Amateur Radio Group, who organizes the event, stresses that this is not a contest but a recognition of the historical importance of each of these sites. Hams wishing to call CQ from any of these sites needs to register on the event's website and provide full information in the online form. Operators must, of course, secure permission from each of the mills to operate there. Of course, there will be awards, and shortwave listeners are encouraged to participate as well. This year, the organizers are asking that all award applicants consider making a donation to their local historic mill or directly to the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings. For details about registering or to find out more about logging contacts, visit nharg.org.uk. Meanwhile, the Society has been collecting stories from volunteers, owners, and even amateur historians about the various mills in the UK, Ireland, or Europe, and how they evolve. The stories will be published in a book. Submission deadline is 1 May. Visit the Society website at spab.org.uk for information on how to contribute.
Amateur radio will be carrying the ball this year for soccer, known in the rest of the world as football, to coincide with the FIFA World Cup 2026. The tournament and unaffiliated ham radio event will run June 11th to June 19th, 2026. As players from around the world compete in the stadiums, amateur radio operators will be looking for contacts during this Football on the Air special event. Teams of hams will be on the air, calling CQ from the same 16 World Cup host cities where the matches will be played throughout North America, starting with the first match in Mexico City on June 11th and ending with the final match in New York and New Jersey on July 19th. The host cities, like the teams, are truly international. 3 are in Mexico, 2 are in Canada, and the remaining 11 are in the United States. With a roster of 48 football teams, this is the largest international tournament to date. Many of the amateur stations will be using one-by-one call signs, such as Whiskey 5 Charlie, operating CW, SSB, and the digital modes on HF and VHF as band conditions allow. Others will have longer special event call signs that can be found on the website, along with a full-color display of the various QSL cards that are available. Each of these QSL cards is collectible and available upon request after a successful contact. There will also be a wildcard bonus station using the call sign Whiskey Charlie 5, Whiskey Charlie. A downloadable multi-city certificate will be available with endorsements at various levels. Host city stations are planning to be on the air on the day of their city's matches, but many will also operate at different times during the tournament. If your ham radio station is near one of the North American host cities, consider joining one of the teams. Visit the special event website and fill out the form under the Volunteer tab at the top of the screen. Organizing the amateur radio special event had its beginnings in a very local moment. Earlier this year, the Lake Whitney Amateur Radio Society in Central Texas was faced with scaling back its big plans for Winter Field Day after a major ice storm struck the region. Ron Franklin, Alpha Alpha 5, Hotel Kilo, who is the soccer event coordinator, said that after the greatly downsized Winter Field Day, a number of club members were still primed for a big-scale activation. With the World Cup matches coming to Dallas, the opportunity presented itself. Members secured support from the group president, Robert Tier, November 9, Kilo Golf Lima. The outreach then began to hams in other host cities, including those in Canada and Mexico. Football on the Air begins at 0000 UTC on June 11th and ends at 2359 on July 19th. For more details, visit www.wc2026ses.org.
A longtime radio amateur is being remembered for his leadership in the National Amateur Radio Society of Italy and a variety of other significant contributions to ham radio in that nation. Graziano Sartori, I0SSH, served the ARI, Italy's National Ham Radio Society, first as vice president of the Rome section and later as the national president. He is credited with developing the first database of Italy's amateur radio call signs, joining in a long-running campaign with international amateur radio organizations, Graziano was a vocal proponent for having Morse code listed as an intangible cultural heritage element with UNESCO. Graziano died on April 8th. A tribute to him on the ARI website described him as a leader whose actions and personal interest in his fellow hams made him effective in his various roles throughout his long association with the organization. He was 89.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. And we begin this week with news that ITU Corporation has purchased the former Linton, Indiana National Guard Armory to serve as the new manufacturing hub for high-gain and Cushcraft antennas. Martin F. Jew, president and founder of MFJ Enterprises, Inc., was pleased to announce the sale of the high-gain and Cushcraft antenna, rotator, and communication product lines to ITU Corporation, a 25-year-old Indiana engineering and manufacturing company. The designs, tooling, specialized equipment, manufacturing, and marketing rights for high-gain and Cushcraft antennas and rotators are included in the sale. Next, the International Telecommunication Union has published the 2026 edition of the Handbook on Amateur and Amateur Satellite Services. The updated reference provides comprehensive information on the amateur and amateur satellite services, including relevant ITU regulatory texts, technical guidelines, and operational practices. IARU President Tim Allen, VE6SH/G4HUA, highlighted the handbook's release, noting its value to national administrations, regulators, and amateur radio organizations worldwide. The document serves as an essential resource for anyone involved in frequency coordination, licensing, or satellite project planning. The handbook is available for download free of charge at www.itu.int. AMSAT was well represented at the CubeSat Developers Workshop 2026, held April 14th through the 16th at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California. AMSAT President Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, delivered updates on amateur satellite projects and conducted live on-air demonstrations using the RS-44 linear transponder in SSB mode. Workshop attendees were able to listen to and participate in real-time amateur radio satellite contacts, experiencing firsthand the capabilities of the amateur satellite service. The annual workshop brings together students, educators, researchers, and industry professionals to share advances in small satellite technology through presentations, panels, and exhibits. AMSAT's active participation continues to strengthen connections between the amateur radio community and the broader CubeSat developer ecosystem, opening doors for future collaborative amateur radio payloads.
And our final story to leave you with this week, guest operators are being invited to get on the air this July as part of station GR2HQ, the Radio Society of Great Britain's headquarters team in the International Amateur Radio Union HF World Championship contest. With many of the station's regular operators involved already this year in assisting with the World Radio Sport Team Championship, opportunities are now available for visiting operators. In a notice in the WRTC 2026 Groups I.O. discussion, Nick Totterdell, G4FAL, chairman of the RSGB HF Contest Committee, said that the invitation to join the headquarters team station is extended only to those radio operators who are not committed to supporting the WRTC during the contest period. There is a good choice of locations throughout the UK. A maximum of 12 stations will be using the call sign GR2HQ in the IARU event from such locations in Wales, Scotland, and England on the 6 contest bands. Nick said the operating will be done in shifts at the various sites, most of which will be in members' homes. Some locations will also be operating field day style. Interested radio operators should send an email to contestclub@rsgbcc.org. That's Contest Club, all one word, at rsgbcc.org.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeater systems all around the U.S. and around the world on great operations like WA0RCR from the center of the U.S., Wentzville, Missouri, where This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to be part of the legendary Gateway 160-meter net report each weekend. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.